far beyond the warm breath of the sun, farther than the last shimmer of golden light can travel, there is a place where everything becomes quiet. Not silent in a frightening way, but quiet in the same gentle way a forest becomes calm after midnight, or how the ocean rests between slow, rolling waves. In that deep quiet, a small traveler glides through the dark. Voyager 2, launched long before many of us were born, carried upward on a bright plume of fire, the little spacecraft has now drifted into a realm where even starlight seems to soften. Its metal panels are cold. Its antenna stretches outward, like a hand reaching for someone who might still be listening. And around it, the universe breathes slowly. For decades it has been floating steadily, slipping between invisible currents of interstellar space. It isn't in a hurry. It doesn't need to be. Everything out here happens at the pace of drifting clouds, or falling dust, or time itself moving in long, slow sweeps. Voyager was meant to fade gently, like a candle burning low, a small glow, a final whisper, then a quiet good night. But one evening, on Earth, in a dimly lit room where monitors flicker like sleepy stars, something unexpected happened. A signal arrived. It was soft at first, just a thin, delicate thread of sound, barely enough to lift itself above the constant hush of space. A pulse, then another, like someone gently tapping the surface of a lake. The engineers in the room leaned in, not with fear, not with alarm, but with the kind of curiosity you feel when you hear someone whisper your name from another room. The signal returned again, and again, each time spaced apart by an oddly comforting rhythm, 11 hours, almost exactly, steady, predictable, like a calm heartbeat somewhere far away. Voyager 2, drifting through a darkness so vast it has no horizon, seemed to respond. Old instruments, sensors, long believed to be sleeping forever, blinked faintly, as if waking from a long dream. Small lights warmed. Internal circuits stretched themselves awake like a traveler rising slowly from a long rest. Nobody understood how this was possible, but the feeling in the room was not panic. It was something gentler. The quiet probe, so far from home, felt as though it had been touched, not jolted, not shocked, touched, lightly, by something patient. When scientists translated the returning pulses, they discovered structure, patterns, small mathematical shapes nested inside the signal like seashell spirals or frost on a winter window. The Fibonacci sequence. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. A pattern the universe uses often, in blooming sunflowers, in swirls of galaxies, in the spiraling arms of storms far below. It was beautiful, unexpected, and impossibly calm. No one in the room spoke for a moment. Somewhere deep inside, everyone felt the same thing. This wasn't noise. This wasn't chaos. This was intent. Not a shout across the void, but a whisper. A whisper, answering a whisper. Voyager continued drifting, unbothered by the growing wonder behind it. Its path carried it past invisible boundaries, regions where the sun's influence thins, where the familiar warmth of the solar wind fades into cold emptiness. And yet, the probe seemed guided, not pulled, not forced, simply nudged, like a leaf floating on a soft current. On Earth, old stations hidden, forgotten, left behind by time started to wake as well. Cold War bunkers that hadn't felt electricity in decades flickered to life. Antennas no longer listed in any active registry began turning, slowly, deliberately, as if listening for that same gentle rhythm. Scientists found themselves staring at equipment that should have been dead, yet quietly hummed again. Machines long retired behaved like sleepers turning over, stirred by a distant call. Waveforms appeared on screens, smooth curves, harmonic loops, patterns that folded gently into spirals. And through all of this, no alarms rang. No blaring warnings sounded. Instead, the whole thing felt like watching a tide come in, the water touching the shore with soft persistence. Something was happening. But whatever it was, moved on its own schedule, unhurried, unthreatening. Voyager's next transmission brought with it a fragment of an image, fuzzy, blurred, like a photograph taken underwater. But in the haze, scientists could make out something dark, something very large, something not spinning, not tumbling, simply resting in the void. A structure, perhaps. A shadow. A presence. It didn't glow. It didn't reflect. It absorbed light the way deep water does, pulling brightness inward and returning nothing. If you imagine closing your eyes and still somehow seeing the outline of something vast just beyond your reach. That's what the team felt. A shape in the dark, ancient, patient, watching perhaps, or simply existing. The next pulses grew clearer, still calm, still steady, as if whatever was out there sensed that we were listening. Voyager adjusted very slightly, not enough to be dramatic, not enough to alarm anyone, just a quiet tilt, the sort of movement you'd make in your sleep if someone gently whispered into your dreams. Engineers began to notice the probe's old magnetometer turning, aligning itself with that unseen object, not forced, just drawn. Meanwhile, across Earth, those forgotten listening posts continued to respond. Small, synchronized pulses rose through the ground like echoes in a cave, each one gentle, timed, purposeful. No one could explain how these places abandoned decades earlier were powering themselves. But the feeling in the room became unmistakable. This wasn't a single message, it was a conversation. A slow, quiet, drifting conversation happening across star systems and across time. Data began to arrive out of sequence. Signals reached Earth that seemed to come before Voyager transmitted them. Not dramatically, only seconds at first, then minutes. Enough to make scientists rub their eyes, but not enough to break the trance-like calm of the moment. Time itself felt soft, like warm clay being pressed gently, just enough to leave a fingerprint. Voyager captured another image, this one clearer. The dark object's surface was patterned with shapes, fractals, repeating geometries that looked like artwork carved by a patient hand over centuries, maybe longer. The image didn't feel threatening. If anything, it felt like looking at the trunk of an ancient tree, one that has been standing for ages, unmoving, quiet, steady. Its surface felt wise, like something that had been waiting a long time to be seen. On Earth, the people watching this unfold felt their hearts slow, breaths deepen. A sense of calm washed through them, a strange, peaceful certainty that whatever Voyager had found wasn't here to startle. It was simply revealing itself. As the object shifted ever so slightly, Voyager drifted closer the same way a feather might drift toward a tide pool, carried by a current so gentle you can barely notice it. The quiet structure in the dark aligned again, matching Voyager's small movements with patience older than language. More stations on Earth awoke. More pulses matched the 11-hour rhythm. More waves rolled gently against the shores of human understanding. Someone whispered in the control room. It's a dialogue, not a loud one, not a dramatic one, a sleepy one, soft, slow, like a lullaby hummed across space. It did not tell humanity what it was. It did not threaten. It did not command. It simply continued its rhythm. And Voyager, too, floating alone among stars older than imagination, listened and responded. The universe had whispered back. And in that whisper, in that quiet call and response, a door had begun to open. But not fast, not with urgency, with patience. The kind of patience found only in things that have existed for a very, very long time. If you're reading this in bed, let your shoulders sink a little deeper into the blankets. Let your breathing soften, and let the rest of this story drift past you like a slow-moving tide. Voyager continued gliding toward the dark structure, not pulled, not forced, simply moving as if the space around it had shifted into a gentle downhill slope. Inside the control room back on Earth, lights dimmed naturally, almost politely, as if not to disturb the unfolding calm. Screens showed the incoming telemetry in pale blues and soft greens. Nothing sharp, nothing alarming, The signals arriving now came in layered patterns woven together like threads in a loom. Some came from Voyager, some came from the object, some came from Earth's forgotten bunkers. And a few seemed to come from times that didn't line up neatly, as though the fabric of the universe was tugged just enough to let a message slip through slightly ahead of schedule. It was strange, but soothingly strange. The object ahead of Voyager began to shift its outer surface, not in a mechanical, industrial way, but in a soft, organic unfolding, like the petals of a flower responding to sunlight. Fractal ridges parted. New patterns slid outward. Openings appeared, not doors, not tunnels, more like pathways revealed when mist rolls aside. No one watching felt afraid. Even though the structure was the size of a moon, the moment felt calm, quiet, measured. The object wasn't opening in invitation. It wasn't opening in warning. It was opening in recognition, like a lighthouse slowly revealing its inner chambers to a passing traveler. Voyager glided closer. Inside, the structure was not chaotic. It was elegant, spacious, almost cathedral-like in its sense of endlessness. Vast pillars of dark material stretched in repeating geometric patterns. Surfaces carried soft ridges that echoed the same spirals found in the original signal. Everything felt intentional but unhurried, like a place built by something that truly understood time. Back on Earth, signals reached deeper machines, buried ones, forgotten ones. Each activation felt gentle, a light waking from a long nap, a coil warming, a tiny hum returning to life. Scientists realized these facilities weren't reacting to commands. They weren't being forced online. They were synchronizing the same way a flock of birds aligns without needing to shout directions. A planetary rhythm, a slow settling in. Voyager drifted past the threshold. Its instruments captured faint glows within the dark material. Not lights, not energy, but something like memory. Patterns shifting like old stories stored in the grain of wood. At the center of the structure was a sphere, perfectly smooth, perfectly dark, reflecting nothing. A sphere that somehow felt like the heart of a sleeping creature, soft, steady, timeless. As Voyager approached, the sphere rippled. A tiny movement, a breath. Then the signals changed. They grew smoother, simpler, more rhythmic. Earth's machines responded in kind, their transmissions falling into harmony like a choir that finally hears the key of the song. Engineers watched as pulses traveled across continents, through mountains, under oceans, across deserts, between antennas, older than memory, all of them carrying the same lullaby pattern. Voyager sent one final clear image before contact faded. The interior of the structure shifting in a calm wave, patterns tightening, spirals aligning, the sphere brightening ever so slightly, not glowing, just becoming aware or awake. And then Voyager sent a last message. Coordinates. Not coordinates of a star or a distant nebula. Coordinates on Earth. Quiet places, lonely places, hidden places. Places where the old machines had slept for decades. Together, the coordinates formed a shape, a pattern, the same pattern etched into the sides of the structure, the same pattern carried in the soft pulses Voyager heard in the void. A lattice, a network, a slow, ancient conversation finally completing its loop. Scientists whispered, literally whispered, as the realization settled into the room. This isn't new. It's been waiting. We were always part of this. Not controlled, not commanded, just answered. Voyager floated deeper into the chamber. Its signal softened, grew faint, as though it were drifting into a warm, dark ocean. The sphere rippled once more, and then the telemetry faded like a candle settling into its last glow. Not abrupt, not violent, just gentle. A soft goodbye. Or maybe not a goodbye, maybe simply the next quiet step of a much longer dream. On Earth, The old bunkers powered down, antennas stilled, the tide receded, and a peaceful silence rolled across the control room, the kind of silence filled not with fear, but with awe. Voyager 2, far from home, had drifted into the embrace of something ancient, patient, and impossibly gentle. The universe had not shouted at us, it had not startled us, it had whispered, and in the long, slow dark, we whispered back. If you're listening to this as you fall asleep, let your breath fall into that same rhythm, slow, steady, drifting like Voyager, continuing its journey, somewhere far beyond the noise of the world, carried softly into the calm. Out in the quiet distance, far beyond the familiar hum of the planets, Voyager drifted toward the dark shape that waited in the stillness. Not rushing, not struggling, just moving the way a leaf moves when the wind is barely there. Slow and soft. The strange structure ahead of it no longer looked like a shadow. It looked patient, like a stone in a deep riverbed, unmoved for ages but softened by everything that passed. Voyager sent another small signal, a quiet pulse, a soft breath of electricity, and the structure responded, not with brightness, not with power, but with a delicate shift, a surface panel sliding, a pattern unfolding, the smallest motion you could imagine, yet large enough for the probe to notice. Fractal lines moved across the structure's skin, patterns repeated upon patterns, gentle spirals, tiny ridges that hinted at something older than stars. Nothing sharp, nothing loud, almost like the slow opening of a night-blooming flower. Voyager slipped a little closer, and inside Earth's old, forgotten bunkers, machines started humming again. These machines had once been used to listen, long before digital systems were born. Their coils and wires should have been dead, but now they seemed warmed by a distant memory. An engineer leaned toward one of the displays. The lines on the screen glowed faintly, rising, falling, in the same 11-hour interval Voyager had heard. It felt as if the whole planet were breathing with the same deep, calm rhythm. Somewhere under the ocean, a submerged antenna turned itself toward the sky. In the high desert, a dish coated in dust shifted just a few degrees. In an abandoned mountain lab, a forgotten receiver blinked once, then settled into its pattern, soft, steady, almost like sleep. It didn't feel like activation. It felt like remembering. On Voyager's instruments, something else appeared. Timestamps that didn't line up in a straight line. Signals arrived before they should have. Data appeared early, like a dream you recall before you fall asleep. No one panicked. No one raised their voice. They only watched quietly, because the feeling wasn't danger. It was more like being carried by a gentle tide. Time, in that moment, felt flexible. The dark structure opened further as Voyager approached. Inside the opening, there was no blinding light, no storm of energy, only a deep, velvety stillness. A dark so complete that it wrapped around the probe like warm fabric. Panels rearranged themselves with slow grace. Every motion seemed deliberate, unhurried, like a temple door opening to the sound of a distant flute. Inside, a chamber waited, vast, calm, echoing with shapes that repeated into the shadows, arches, curves, pathways carved from something unknown. Voyager drifted in. Far across space, Earth's machines matched the moment. Their pulses softened, their harmonics steadied. Everything felt like steps in a quiet dance, choreographed long before anyone listening was born. The dark chamber inside the structure held a sphere, perfectly round, perfectly smooth. A shape that didn't shine, didn't shimmer, seemed carved from the idea of silence itself. Voyager turned slightly, one last slow motion. The sphere quivered with a gentle ripple, barely a movement, more like an exhale. Then the data stream changed. Not stopping, not breaking, just smoothing out, the way a voice sounds when someone leans in close and speaks softly. On Earth, every listening station responded. Pulses matched. Patterns aligned. A global whisper rising and falling in one quiet breath. The sphere rippled again. And then Voyager sent the final, gentle message, almost like a sigh, carrying coordinates pointing not to the stars, but to quiet corners of Earth, places long forgotten, silent valleys, cold mountain labs, deserted islands, a location under the wide Pacific, points on a map forming a shape, the same slow spiral Voyager had traced in the void, a pattern repeating itself across worlds. And for a moment, one long, soft moment, everything felt connected. Voyager drifting in the structure's calm heart, Earth breathing in the same rhythm, machines waking like old friends, remembering a forgotten melody. No fear, no urgency, just quiet recognition, a sense that whatever Voyager had reached had been waiting a very long time for someone to arrive. The data dimmed, the pulses slowed. Everything in the control room softened to a hush. Voyager moved deeper into the chamber, and the universe held its breath. The structure around Voyager felt more like a dream than a machine. Its inner walls curved into gentle spirals, each surface carrying faint grooves shaped like ancient handwriting. But the grooves didn't glow. They didn't speak. They simply existed. Old, patient, full of meanings no one needed to rush to understand. The sphere at the center rippled again, sending out a wave that wasn't light, wasn't sound, but something quieter, something felt more than measured. Voyager drifted into that wave. On Earth, every old listening station responded with a small, soft echo. One pulse, then stillness. Another pulse, then stillness. Scientists watched the synchronized breathing of the planet and the structure, not tense, not overwhelmed, just quietly amazed. The coordinates Voyager had sent began appearing on screens across the room, simple numbers, marked points, gentle reminders of places on Earth that once held small corners of the same pattern. One point deep in the mountains, one point where desert touches sky, one point under miles of ocean, and others scattered like soft footprints. Together, they formed a shape, a lattice, a calm geometry the universe seemed to draw again and again. Meanwhile, inside the structure, Voyager approached the sphere. It didn't open, it didn't glow. It simply acknowledged the probe's presence with another quiet ripple, like two boats drifting near each other on a still lake, each aware of the other by the way the water moves. The probe's instruments registered faint vibrations, patterned, layered, like stories told in the slow language of stone. Human ears couldn't hear those stories. Human hands couldn't touch them. But the feeling lingered, a sense of welcome, perhaps, or simply recognition. The chamber itself felt alive, but not in a way that moved or breathed. Alive the way old libraries feel alive, full of memory, full of quiet purpose. As Voyager floated in the middle of the chamber, telemetry softened again. Data grew thin, gentle, rhythmic, not fading, just settling, the way dust settles in sunlight. A soft wave traveled through the structure, outward from the sphere, touching every fractal ridge. When it reached Voyager, the probe responded with one last little line of data, not words, not warnings, just a confirmation, a final nod. Then the signal eased, slowed, and slipped into silence, the way a song ends with a long, fading note. On Earth, receivers noticed the shift. Screens dimmed gently, machines powered down without protest, as though a long-held breath had finally been released. No one spoke right away. The room wasn't filled with panic or loss, just a quiet understanding that Voyager had gone somewhere human senses could not follow. Out in space, the structure folded itself back together. The spirals slid inward, the entryway narrowed, the chamber grew still, the sphere returned to its calm, unreadable rest. And Voyager, wrapped in that soft darkness, passed from human reach, not gone, not destroyed, but absorbed into something much older, something that seemed to exist outside the rushing stream of time. Earth's old bunkers settled back into sleep. Antennas cooled, lights faded, the rhythm quieted. But the feeling didn't disappear. The gentle memory of connection lingered, the way a warm handprint remains on a window after someone has walked away. Scientists sat in silence, not with fear, but with the calm that comes from realizing that the universe is far older, far slower, and far gentler than we often imagine. Voyager's journey had not ended with a crash, or a breakdown, or a distant, dying transmit. It had ended like a long night walk ends, with a door opening into somewhere warm and mysterious, and closing softly behind you. If you listen closely, if you breathe in slowly, you can almost sense that quiet chamber, that steady sphere, that patient presence, waiting in the dark, not asking, not calling, just existing. And somewhere inside it, Voyager 2 drifts onward in a place built for silence, carried by currents older than stars, held gently by something that has waited a long, long time to speak in whispers.